What is going on, miners, and welcome back to the Hobbyist Miner channel. Well, today we're going to go ahead and jump into a video that I've been meaning to do for a while now, but really wasn't sure how to tackle it. Before we do though, I want to let you know that there is a channel announcement at the very end of this video, so please stay tuned for it. So in today's video, we're going to do a basic run through of some of the common hardware that you're going to see out there. And a lot of this stuff that you see, if you're an experienced miner, it's a dime a dozen. But if you're a new miner, which is what a lot of my channel appeals to, some of these things may make you go, I could use that, or I didn't even know that existed. So let's go ahead and go through it. A lot of this information may be redundant to you, but if it is of value to one person, this video was worth it. So let's start talking about power supplies. So there's really two different power supplies out there. You have an ATX power supply, which is traditional that you see in most computers. A lot of miners will go with a very large ATX power supply, 1,000, 2,000 watt. That is usually modular. This one is semi-modular. And it comes with, your SATA, your 6-pin, your 8-pin, your 24-pin, all that plug into your motherboard and your different components. There is also your HP, and there's some Dells out there too, server power supplies, and these are very common as well. These are power supplies that are pulled out of old servers, refurbished, and resold on the market. Traditionally, your HP server power supplies are cheaper than your ATX power supplies. So in reality, you can find a 1200 watt server power supply anywhere from $50 to $100 versus trying to find a 1200 watt ATX power supply for that price is very hard. Now what happens with these is there's a separate board. This plugs into this, and this is called a breakout board. And as you guys can notice, these individual little plugs go ahead and go from here to power your different GPUs and your risers. So on that note, let's jump here. And also, side note, you can run both of these simultaneously. So for a lot of my rigs, I will go ahead and run an ATX power supply to power the motherboard, and then a server power supply to go ahead and handle my GPUs. A great example is right here. I have an ATX power supply plugged in to this H110 Pro board, and that's all it's powering. And then I have a 1200 watt power supply here, as well as another 1200 watt power supply here, powering these GPUs and powering these GPUs. So moving on from there, we have graphics cards. Very, very common. This is a 1080, this is a 470. I'm sorry, this is a 580, 8 gig. So you'll see these mounted to a Veta frame. I'll throw up a picture of my old Veta frame that I used to use. And so that is the most common way that you're gonna come across graphics cards and GPUs and kind of what they're held in, the frame, the body of them. Something new that's kind of hit the market in the last year are GPU hangers, which is what you see here. This is actually one of my own, actually has the Hobbyist Miner logo on the top, as well as the name at the bottom. We'll have more news about this later this week. But the way that these work is they go ahead and hook into your GPU, and then you can hang them via a metal rack like this here. This is my 12 GPU rig with 470s as well as 570s. So without getting a Veta frame or anything like that, this is kind of how you would do that. And that's actually how I do all of my cards, is actually hanging. I don't have any Veta frames anymore. So following up from there, let's talk about cords. These cords, they're everywhere, as well as our risers. So the riser is an extension of the motherboard. So traditionally, your motherboard may only have 1 or 2, or some of the nicer boards have 3, 4, 5, 6 X16 slots on the board itself. A riser is just an extension of that, is how that works. Now the riser is not an X16 slot, it's just an extension of the PCIe slot. And the way that the riser works is the riser actually will go ahead and plug directly into the bottom of the GPU. Now the bottom of the GPU here is rated to pull at most 75 watts. So what we have here on our riser is we have a variety of different plugs. We have our 6-pin, our USB header, Sata, and Molex. So traditionally with a lot of cheap risers, it comes with a 6-pin to SATA. So, sorry about that, the camera cut out. You never want to use this cheap cable that comes with a lot of the cheap risers. This is a 6-pin to a SATA connection that you can see on this U-bit riser. And the reason I bring that up is this is rated for 54 watts for SATA. And what did we say that this was? 75 watts. So that's why there's a lot of warnings out there of fire hazards with these. So never use these. It shouldn't even exist on a riser, to be honest with you. Molex is the big question in the community. Molex, based off the quality of the actual cable, the pin and everything, is rated from 60 up to like 150, 156, but that all comes down to the quality of the cable. So are you going to be the one to go ahead and gamble that? Because once again, let's say it's at the bottom of the barrel at 60. Didn't we just say this was rated for 75? So do not use Molex on there. Finally, we have our 6-pin. So the way that this cable works is this is a 6 to 6+2. So it starts out as a 6. So you would plug this into our breakout board here, and then from there you could go straight into a GPU if you need to with an 8-pin, or it kind of pops off and you can do a 6-pin on this end. Now this is currently rated, is my understanding, up to 196 watts. So that's plenty. That's plenty to be plugged into our riser. That's plenty to go ahead and power the 75 watts here. So that's why most miners are going to go ahead and recommend this. Now let's say you have a splitter. I have two here. The one that traditionally comes with these, and then there's also, this one is a little bit bigger. This is from DeepMind. I'll have links to these down below if you're interested. So if we said this was 196 watts, you can divide this by 2, and that gives you 92, 93 watts each. So you could power the riser as well as like your card or whatnot. So there's plenty of opportunity with these splitters, and that's why it's a safe bet to go with them. Sorry we spent so much time talking about those cables there. Moving on, we have Velcro straps that are used for cable management. We have your traditional C14 cable here. I'm sorry, this is C13 actually. This is what you traditionally would use with like your ATX power supply, monitor, computer tower. That's common. This one is a C14 on this side to a C13 on this side, and this is commonly used with a PDU like this one down here, and that PDU is actually a 30 amp 240 volt PDU that I'm using to power all my rigs, and we use that in conjunction with our 30 amp 240 volt meter that we have there. Ignore this room, it's a mess. Lots of construction going on there. Another item is a voltage meter. This is a super common one. This is called a kilowatt voltage meter. A lot of people will use these to plug their rig into in order to get a true number on the actual voltage that their rig is using, versus something like HIVEOS, which doesn't give you true metrics. So this is great. I'll put a link down below in the parts list. Look for the Hobbyist Miner parts list. These work phenomenally. We have solid state drives. I use solid state drives on all of my rigs. They're kind of hidden here and there. There's one right over there on that one. This one, it's over there. And on this one, we got a little fancy, and it's kind of back here mounted with aluminum angle there on that setup there. So these have Windows 10 on them or HIVEOS. This is a SATA to USB adapter. So if I'm going to go ahead and set up a new rig, I can take this, put it in, and then there's a USB port on the back as well as a power to go into an outlet, plug it into my desktop computer, and using Etcher, which is a software program, I can put HIVEOS right onto these solid state drives, and then I'm on my merry way for a new rig that I set up. So these are really, really nice. We do have a motherboard. This is a very basic one, nothing crazy. We do have, I showed you earlier, an H110 board. This is just an HP motherboard with 8 gigs of memory. We have our CPU underneath here, as well as a heatsink and a heatsink fan. So this is a basic part that you're going to see out there. We have a number of these. We got like a B250 mining motherboard, same concept. We have an H110 Pro mining motherboard. Now, as you can tell, these are mining motherboards. So look how many PCI slots they have on it. This one has 13, and this one has 19. Granted, you can't use the end of these. The last few, as you can see, are open because they need to be the P series mining cards on that motherboard. But a traditional motherboard is simple, basic, and easy. I've been using more and more of these just because of how expensive some of these nicer motherboards are. Like the H110 Pro, man, it's like $300-$400, where I can get a setup like this for 50 bucks with CPU, memory, and the board, keeping that in mind. Another type of board you'll see out there is something like this. This is a board that I just got in. This is a RebTech board. So this is kind of like an all-in-one solution. So this has your CPU on it, your heatsink, your fan, it's got your memory, and then I do have a M2 to put in here as well. Now this one is definitely a dedicated mining board. Check it out. You don't even use PCI adapters or anything. You just go right into the USB headers. So this is a different type of motherboard that you'll see out there. Both of these you could use based off of your situation. Power buttons. This is just one that I ripped out of an old commissioned HP tower, but you'll find a bunch of these on Amazon, little ones that you use. I've just gone ahead and recycled those. I have them everywhere. Like here's one here, as well as down here. I have one right here, and just used to turn off and on the rig. Simple, basic, easy. We do have standoffs. Standoffs, these are very common. If you're mounting a motherboard or power supply to a metal rack, you'll use something like these standoffs here. They just go ahead and go, here's a great example. They go ahead and go between the rack and the motherboard to keep the motherboard from touching straight metal. In addition to that, some other little accessories and stuff like that we have here. This is a PCI slot to 1 to 4. This is what we're actually using in my rig right over here. Take a look. We're using those right there, 1 to 4 on an HP motherboard. So if you're in a situation like this, you only have 2 PCI slots. What you can go ahead and do is use this and just plug it in, and bam, now we've gone from 1 slot to 4 slots, which are great for mining. And all of this stuff, guys, I'll try to put a whole list of this in my parts list down below. We talked about these in a previous video. These are PCI adapter clips, and I'll show you guys where I use those. These are something that are super common to go ahead and hold these PCI adapters in so that they don't move, especially when you're doing maintenance on your rigs. We have a 4K dummy plug. These are used in a lot of your 3060s because some of the cards require you to have like a monitor plugged in, so this acts as a fake monitor. So these dummy plugs are great. They're 4K HDMI dummy plugs. We also have the M2 SATA adapter. So on an M2 board, something like that, not that I'd use on the RebTech here, this would plug into your M2 slot. And this, let's say that your hard drive is SATA. This gives you an additional slot that you can use for a GPU. We have thermal pads. On your GPUs, when you take off your heatsink, which I advise on all GPUs that you get in that are secondhand, to take off the heatsink and the shroud and replace the thermal paste and the pads. So these are the pads as well as some thermal paste. I actually have some new thermal paste coming in here shortly. So outside of that, that was a quick rundown of all of our goodies here. We also do have our risers. So risers, we talked about this type of riser here. This is a U-bit riser. So we have the U-bit riser. And then the way that the U-bit riser connects back to the motherboard is the USB-A plugs into the riser. And then it's an extension. And then we have a PCI adapter here that plugs directly into our motherboard like that. And that allows it to extend that slot is what we're used to. In addition, we do have, this is a USB 3.0 braided cable, and it's also significantly, as you can see, significantly longer. I've started to use these longer USB braided cables in situations like here. So like you see how long this cable is here? Going from here, I have it wired up and going back into the motherboard, instead of just like trying to make it from here right to there, and it gets like super taut and everything. So I never want my USB cable to be my limitation as to where I put my GPU. So that's why I really like these, and these are nice. They're braided, they're better quality as well. So if you guys made it this long in the video, thank you. Hopefully you learned something in here, or you found a piece of tech that you're like, I need that, I want that. I'm hoping a lot of you guys learned a little bit about what cables to use and what not to use. So at the end of the day, use your PCI cable 99% of the time, please. So with all that being said, we have an announcement for the channel. We have one of our first channel partners that we are bringing on to the channel, talking about risers. And let me go ahead and show you guys. Alrighty, so let's take a look. What in the world? So I criticized GPU risers because I was very much kind of rubbed me the wrong way with the quality of the pads falling off. And I actually reached out to them months ago about the pads. Why did the pads fall off the back? And they let me know that's because they do, the solders that they do are extra thick for the quality purpose. And I was like, oh, okay, sounds good, sounds good. So anyways, these guys reached out to me, and I chatted with them quite a bit, because as you can imagine, I was a little concerned with just the quality of the product. And they told me a lot about their latest product, which is their latest version of a riser. So take a look at this monster. Look at this thing. Look at this riser versus this riser. Holy cow. So a few things that they kind of gave me a punch list to let me know what's different about this one than this one. So a few things regarding quality and reliability. This has 8 capacitors total versus something like the U-bit here only has 3. So that's super helpful from a quality perspective and reliability. In addition to that, they let me know that these now have 3 different indicator LEDs on them versus just 1. They also went ahead and removed the Sata. Thank God. That should not be on there in any way. Like, thank you. They do have a additional 6-pin slot, PCI slot here and here, so you could power it from either direction there. So overall, I'm really happy to go ahead and try these out. Oh, check that out. It's got their little logo on there, right on the riser. That's pretty sweet. So anyways, guys, we have gone ahead and partnered with GPUrisers.com, one of our first channel partners. Super excited. Once we got the partnership going and got all the details figured out, they went ahead and sent me a boatload of risers to replace all my U-bit risers and to replace all of my previous version GPU risers entirely, and then have some room for expansion to grow and use the rest of these risers. So super excited to get into these and start to use these. So thank you very much to GPUrisers.com for supporting the Hobbyist Miner channel as well as the Hobbyist Miner community. So what they've done in addition, guys, is if you guys want to buy GPU risers from GPUrisers.com or from EU, you can use the promo code The Hobbyist Miner, one word. I'll put it down below here, The Hobbyist Miner, and you'll get 10% off your purchase, which I think is phenomenal. You know, I'm so happy that they're giving you guys a discount and supporting the community. So other than that, go check them out. Final promo for our new partner, GPUrisers.com. Give them some love. Do appreciate those giant orange boxes. Well, guys, that's going to go ahead and wrap it up for today. Hopefully you guys learned something while going through all of this. If you guys have any other additional recommendations on hardware that maybe I missed, that you're like, hey, don't forget about this, or if you spotted something in here that you're like, oh, here's more details on it, or a mistake was made, please put it in the comments. I love reading the comments. I read every single comment on my channel, regardless of the size that we continue to grow. Well, if you guys enjoyed this video, please go ahead and give it a thumbs up, and don't forget to subscribe. Take care.